Code Keepers, hey, we're back with another great episode of Professor Kimya's class. You know what? Let's do this at the very beginning.
Black diamond, 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 black diamond.
Grandpa Crump. Had to do that. Turn it up a little bit. Hey, Code Keepers, we're in for a gem today. We have the good doc on the call. Professor Kimya, the class
Hey.
is ready for you to rock steady. I went back in my old school days.
Yeah, that's
The
the only
class is
hip hop.
ready so you can rock
Rock
steady.
steady.
So rock on.
To the break of dawn. All right.
Oh, see, that was cool because we went from 80s to 90s like that.
Yes, we switched it. But your audience ain't ready for that quite yet.
Hey, so what you got for us tonight?
Yeah, so tonight we're actually talking about 5 things that Maggie Lena Walker did that our people can accomplish. And the way I want our people to look at it as integrating Black ideas. So that's why I'm integrating Maggie Lena Walker with Amabalo. So Amabalo was born in a different part of Virginia, but Amabalo's work for more than 30 years was based in Richmond, VA, which is where my brothers and I are born and raised, 2 up, 2 down, 804. So we'll talk about that from Maggie Lena Walker, who's 804, and then Amabalo, who was born from farmers elsewhere in Virginia, but did the Richmond tenants work in the 804 area. So we'll talk about that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, 5 things. You need to integrate Maggie Lena Walker and Alma Barlow. I'm not up on Alma Barlow, so I'm always learning something new with you, Doc.
Yes, I want our people to learn about our people, learn about each other. 99.9% of humans, since the origins of humans, are never going to become celebrities, famous, and well known. And they might be more known after they pass away if they've accomplished things. So I really want our people as Black people, as African origins people, to understand you don't have to wait for somebody to be considered like a mainstream celebrated Black person before learning about the existence of the person and what the person has contributed to our people. And I'm talking about Black people contributing to Black people, specifically Black people contributing to Black people. So we'll start off with Maggie Lena Walker. So businesswoman and teacher Maggie Lena Walker, also termed Maggie L. Walker, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, 1864 to 1934. So when you go to Richmond, VA, you will go on Broad Street and you can find the statue. And the statue is, it's a huge memorial area where they have examples of what Maggie Lena Walker accomplished in the Richmond area. So you will notice it when you walk by it or even if you drive by it as well. We also have the Maggie L. Walker High School in Richmond, VA, again, where my brothers and I were born and raised. And so we want our people to understand the accomplishments of Maggie Lena Walker. So here's one of the components, and I actually integrate Maggie Lena Walker when I talk about the contributions of W.B. Du Bois, contributions of Marcus Garvey, Harold Cruz, and other people, because Maggie Lena Walker is different. Not just concepts and theories, because Harold Cruz, of course, said that we as Black people need to create more of our own concepts, theories, and research, right?
Right.
Maggie Lena Walker presented some concepts and some plans and actually put it into strategies, actions, and outcomes. So as a people, we need more of our own concepts and theories and research. But now Maggie Lena Walker is an example of how we can put all this into actual actions. So get it off the paper, get it out of our mind, off the paper, and put it in real life. And this is where that's the first point. getting our people to understand the importance of having our own concepts and theories. As Africans, we have thousands of years of concepts and theories that our people have created. I want our people to stop saying all of it's stolen from us. A lot of it is passed down word from word. Some of it's passed down in writings. We have a lot of writings. And guess what? Not all of it's about racism. We have a lot of work that our people have done for a full span, including economic development work. So when we understand what our people have written, what our people have taught and explained, that's the first thing. Now we have what our people are writing, increasingly writing. It doesn't have to be a bestseller either. Now Maggie Lena Walker is given an example of putting that into place and evaluating it to see if it actually works. So that's the first point there. The second point, Maggie Lena Walker highlights the importance of collaborating, forms of leadership, and knowledge development. So Maggie Lena Walker, the work that she did, as you can imagine, required a whole lot of collaborations, right? You're not just doing this by yourself.
What type of work did she do that required the collaborations? Because a lot of times we think we can do it for ourselves. You know that it's the American way. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Yeah, so that's the critique of American mindset, which is, of course, based in the British mindset. So it's a racial white mindset that everyone else is taught to accommodate to. So that is a notion of what we call individualism. And so when we learn about individualism, we don't have to abandon individual components, because that's not only an American thing. So we can acknowledge individual components, but there's no such thing as up from the bootstraps. So when I do resource tables in communities, and someone comes to a resource table and says, oh, we don't need these resources. It's all up to everybody to do it on their own. I says, no, it's up to everyone to be conscious and aware and active in their own contribution to their results, and to utilize what's out there to help their results. So that's how it all goes together. So that's the collaborations part.
That's one of the things that I really like about your talks, your work, because you're letting us know that the resources that we pay taxes to have, they're funded by our taxpayer dollars, are there for us.
Yes. Yeah.
And you know what? It seems so simplistic, but it also, we're taught the opposite.
Who's taught the opposite? Black people? Sure. Yes, black people are. Yeah. Because non-blacks tend to be taught, and this is around the world as well, to utilize what is out there. Even if they act like they're not utilizing it, they're taught to utilize it. So,
yeah, I remember having, some of the elders would tell me that when, people would travel here to the States, they had access to these programs. And I would say, well, if these programs exist, why aren't we using them? And very often there was no answer. It was interesting. Now when I think back on some of the, and I'm not downing my elders, I am, because of a lot of the teachings that they provided me, the guidance, the prayers, the ashes, everything. I give it up to them for who I am. But there were questions that I would have, and I was like, well, if it's there for this group, why isn't it there for us? And very often when I think back, I realize that it was the experience that our predecessors had where we were locked out of things that gave a really in-depth belief that it wasn't for us. So when you say, hey, your taxpayer dollars funds these libraries, funds this fire department, funds this grant program, funds this, and the plethora of things that you talk about, it's really mind-shifting. It's really mind-shifting.
We need to shift our people's minds, because we have centuries of being brainwashed as a people to have this oppressed mindset, such that those of us who focus on solutions for our people, whether that's talking about Marcus Garvey's work, Maggie Lena Walker's work, Harold Cruz's focus, anything that's talking about solutions, there are people who always want us to take a U-turn and say, nope, 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 oppression, right? And I'm a black woman born and raised in this, what was the second capital of the Confederacy. My parents from South Carolina. We're here because of transatlantic slavery. However, the whole purpose of what our elders and ancestors have done for 5 centuries regarding race and thousands of years before that, before race existed, was so that we don't keep doing this oppression talk and we don't keep talking about protests and marches. It's literally, what have we created for our people to utilize? So yes.
It's that's, I'm telling you, in some ways, that's the new concept to some folk.
And I want it to stop being new. I want adult black people to learn this, teach it in households. It doesn't mean that you're ignoring problems, and that includes family problems. So I also want black folks to understand problems are not just outside the household. There's problems inside the household. There's health problems, mental health, physical health. There's problems in our communities. And that's also, of course, what you and I talked about with Septima Clark. When Septima Clark did her work, yes, she critiqued white people, but she was honest about focusing on the inner world of black people, which is also what Harold Cruz talked about, which is also what Marcus Garvey and Du Bois and them talked about. Regarding the whole immigration, population, and utilizing resources, that's actually what I posted on social media on March 6th, because March 6th is the day, a long time ago, when Marcus Garvey had gotten on the ship to move to the United States of America. And it took weeks to actually arrive. And then he stayed with a Jamaican family in Harlem. And I explained in that video the important role that played. And Marcus Garvey, of course, did a lot of work. However, being that he is a Negro from Jamaica, there was skepticism, which is understandable to some degree. The focus has to be on collaborations because we're not competing with our people around the world. But also, that's also an understanding the issues regarding African immigrants from all over the place. And that's what I explained in that Marcus Garvey video as well. If people are immigrating to the United States of America, the question is, people born and raised here, your taxpayer dollars, are people going to contribute to the resources and not just pull from it? The same thing I tell African Americans. If you're traveling to Jamaica, the Caribbean, to Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, East Africa, wherever you go, don't show up as a tourist, because that's a very Eurocentric, Amerocentric mindset. Instead, you're not stealing from our people there, you're contributing to our people there, because they put everything into the resources that you're about to utilize. So you better be contributing to that and not stealing from it, because you are an annoying tourist and you're an invader, because they will see you as a colonizer. And they particularly see that for Africans born and raised in America for centuries. And of course, when you talk about the first migration to Liberia a century ago, what it meant with the initial coup d'etat that happened as well. So that's just all things to consider. So this is a component you can understand that when we explain this, that's something that Maggie Lena Walker, of course, was not focusing on, but that's something that our people can think about. What does it mean to collaborate with each other and collaborating with people who are not black, but understanding that you don't have to agree on everything. You're saying, okay, here's some end goals. Our end goals might not be the exact same, but what can we contribute to each other without stealing from each other? And that's a huge component. And the leadership part is important because Maggie Lena Walker, tremendous leader. She also did disability services because she eventually, as she got older, was not able to walk. So that's a very important role that she had as well.
Wait. Didn't know about that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So she was a trailblazer for Black economic development, Black education, Black political leadership. So I'll just highlight some parts of that. So she was also part of one of the secret societies because that was a part of the networking among other Negroes at that time and connecting. So in 1899 is when Maggie Lena Walker led the Independent Order of St. Luke as Right Worthy Grand Secretary. The focus is on banking, newspaper, and retail enterprises. So that's a focus that Maggie Lena Walker intentionally took in 1899, which is a huge deal because you're noticing everything that's happening around you.
All right, so was that the secret society?
Yep, that's a component of the secret society. Yep.
All right, so this was not the boule and none of the crazy stuff that some of my other hoteps talk about.
I wouldn't even call it crazy. Okay, it's not crazy. Number one, I do want people who call themselves hotep to understand the meaning of hotep as well, and ankh and all of that. That's Northern Africa. So if you also want to distinguish, are you talking about the Nubians of Northern Africa, or are you talking about thousands of years of Arab Muslim colonizers? And a lot of times when hoteps are showing, well, that is a huge difference. And I want our people to understand the first colonizers of Africa were in Northern Africa, and those are people who became racially categorized as Asian. That's thousands of years before the Europeans invaded. So I want our people to, before you criticize boule, fraternities and sororities that are black, think about the images that you're showing of our people. Are you showing the Nubian images, or are you showing the fair skin, thinner featured hair, thinner noses that are actually Arab Muslims, which also shaped how Islam spread across African lands as well. So I want our people to think critically. When you're criticizing everything that our people do, it means that our people cannot do anything, basically. Because colorism was introduced by Arab Muslim colonizers. Before Europeans created racial categories and the racism of power disparities, colorism and issues of facial features were introduced by Arab Muslim colonizers. And by the way, every ethnicity and nation around the world has colorism and issues regarding hair textures. You can go to different Asian nations, indigenous to Western Hemisphere nations. It's all over the world. It's not just Africans that have that
so
issue.
you're saying it's not just us? Because, we
It's
get
not
into
just us.
we get into that crazy thing like, we're the only people. No, we're not. It's just our people. No, we're not. Shut up. You don't know what
No.
you're talking about. You haven't read enough. And that's always bothered me. But today is about Maggie Lena Walker.
It's
Let me
okay
get
to
off
vent.
that. Let me get
It's
off
okay
that.
to
I was about
woosah.
to get on my hotep seat. Let me get off my
Get it off
kingly
your chest.
throne.
Get it off your chest. It's okay. No, so we can highlight our people and say that you're prioritizing our people, but we have to stop saying that we're the only people for this, and this, and this. We have to also stop saying we created this, and this, and this, and pretending that everything around the world was created by our people. Because if that's the case, we need to be very embarrassed that we can be so oppressed, but yet we created so many things for thousands of years. So anyway.
Ooh, see, now that flies in the face of, what was in that? Blacked Out by Whitewash. Do you remember that book?
I do. Uh-huh.
And a lot of us came into consciousness through that book.
I just tell our people, we just have to be really conscious. Are you running your mouth just to gas up your ego? Our confidence as a people cannot be, we were kings and queens. Number one, less than 1% of humans are kings and queens over thousands of years. And kings and queens abuse people. So why would you want to be kings and queens in the first place? So I don't think it's not a compliment. We're agriculture.
I remember when I used to do a lot of talks. When I was back in my woke, I don't want to say woke, conscious time period. I'm just not as intrigued with it as I used to be. There was a time that I was loving it, and I was speaking to everybody I could. And one of the talks that I had at Old Dominion University, I shared with them that
757.
Okay, yeah, 2 up, 2 down for VA. The concept of kings and queens is a European construct. So while our people had people who were in charge, who made decisions, who were responsible, who may have had something connected or similar to royalty, using that term may not necessarily fit as easily as we wanted to use it. So I also would have said we shouldn't be saying kings and queens.
Okay. So I criticize it for a different reason. Because number one, you can't speak English and tell people don't say kings and queens because it's European. Because you speak in a European language in and of itself. So that's
Yeah,
one thing to consider, right? I just more so say it because people say kings and queens because that is something that has origins over generations ago. Because our people just had so many problems that we were trying to find
right,
anything to celebrate. So it wasn't originally based on facts. It was based on finding some form of beauty, which is also why
right.
books
We had
like
to pump
Ivan,
ourselves up. We
right,
had to
which is
pump
also
ourselves
why
up.
the books like Ivan Van Sertima's books and stuff like that were exaggerated to mean an exaggerated impact on the Western Hemisphere prior to transatlantic slavery. Like all these things were to imply that we just had this huge impact everywhere. We're basically royalty. You know, all of us were born with perfect bodies, beautiful dark chocolate, and just on open land, butt naked, you know, on African lands until the invaders came in. And that's actually still an image. So when I talk to our people who are born and raised on African lands, we'll explain this issue of depicting African lands as perfection. You'll be
Mm,
shocked when you actually visit African lands. It doesn't mean it's all negative. It just means that we just have to create a balance. You have to
mm.
create a balance because that's really unfair to exaggerate the perfection and pretend that we were just pure and perfect until those other people arrived. That's a lot of false pressure to put, and it's just not, that's not realistic about humans in general.
And
So
it's
yeah.
not factually based either. But what is factually based is what you were talking about about Queen. I'm gonna use the term Queen Maggie Lena Walker. Ooh, yo,
Yeah, we're
she
not
was a
gonna call
bad
her
chick.
queen. We're gonna call her businesswoman and teacher. Okay. So
All right,
yeah.
you can
So
call it that.
all right. So you can go back to that first slide, please. So we can just highlight the banking influence that she had on the first slide there. And so
Right,
we'll just
and
go over this quickly. Uh huh.
I know your slide says she was the nation's first black woman bank president,
Uh huh. Yep.
but could we also say that she was the nation's first woman president, bank president?
I
I
see.
think
I don't.
so.
Well, I don't know if she was the first woman president in general because I can't attest to. Because you have to think back. Well, you have to look at population size. So there's a reason why it's compared to white people because that's based on population representation, and that includes even when there's an increase in Hispanic and Latino populations. There are white Hispanics. There are white Latina people as well. So the comparison group oftentimes will be white people, but I don't know if there was a woman bank president before then.
I did a
So,
little research and I wasn't able to find one. I've actually seen statements that says that she was the first woman that chartered a bank in the United States of America.
okay. Well,
But
yay.
hey, yeah,
Congratulations. However, so here's the thing about African women have thousands of years of doing gender justice work. Here's the thing though, once you say the first woman and you remove the racial component from it, it becomes like this mark of gender justice and pretends that in 1903 that there was such equality that she also fought for gender justice alongside white women. And that's not really like my founders for Delta Sigma Theta marched along to women's suffrage, right? And that was long after that was a few years after 1903.
right, right.
So yeah, so that's why race is an important component to interlock with gender here, because I can't promise what white women were or were not doing in 1903, and I'm not interested either. I mean, I'm not interested in that.
Hey, code keepers, if you'd like for Doc and I to have a conversation about our divine nineness, she's a beautiful member of Delta Sigma Theta, one of the best that ever did it. I could say the best who ever
Did you
did
say
it.
one of? I'm about to hang up.
Yeah, because I'm making Omega Psi Phi the best.
Okay. All right, Coma
So,
Love.
all right, yeah, all right. But a lot of times people in this conscious space will push back on those of us who are involved in Greek lettered organization. So, hey, Code Keepers, if you would love for Doc and I to dive into that, let us know. Let us know in the show notes with your comments.
Look here. I don't dive into black folks' arguments. I dive into intellectual development. I don't dive into stuff where people just want to do a battle rap. If it's gonna be a battle rap, it's gotta be something more interesting. I want our people to
I'm
actually
simply
learn.
saying if they want to learn more about it, if they want the real deal, let us know.
It's the real hip hop, hip hop. So I do want our people to understand we have some of our trailblazers, like Du Bois, like other trailblazers over the centuries who actually were members of the Divine Nine. Surprise!
Hey,
And
was Maggie Lena Walker divine? Because she strikes me as Delta material.
she's definitely Delta material, but there's no record of her being a Soror. No.
Okay, all right. Well, all right. Go ahead and claim her, y'all.
You don't get me in trouble at national headquarters. So
Yeah,
so the role with
posthumously, yeah.
banking, the role with banking, newspaper, and retail. We can go to the next slide, please. So you see in here that Maggie Lena Walker is collaborating with all of this and connecting the banking part with retail and enterprises and showing our people how it all connects. And so this is a general photo there. All right. So, and this is where I put up there highlighting social, economic, and political development. The role of economic development is very important because as a people, you and I talk about Black economic development every day. And we want our people to understand what wealth building means, what resource development means. Also, we want our people to understand there are some scam ideas. We want our people to stop falling for scams. We want our people to stop falling for unrealistic solutions, which are oftentimes exaggerations that come with conspiracy theories oftentimes as well. And so Maggie Lena Walker was an example back then, an example that can be used now of things like boycotts. So we talk about what happened here when they boycotted the segregated streetcars. Now here's something to keep in mind. I always explain boycotts to our people. I'm one of those people, I boycott things without it being the popular topic. So I always want our people to understand just because a boycott becomes advertised on news stations and social media, that does not make it more legitimate, because you have to understand once something is announced it's about to happen, businesses prepare for the boycott. They prepare. They decide, are they going to change their expenses for a period of time to bring in more profit? How are they going to market it in a different kind of way to convince some people to still shop there? If you're boycotting a store, that means that you might not go there in person, but people will buy online, especially if there is going to be a discount to purchase online. I want our people to think in the 21st century mindset. You can't be back in the 1900s. So look at the effectiveness of the boycott that the segregated streetcars had. It was very effective. However, our ancestors and our elders who still are alive, and they've been doing this work for 50 plus years before many of us were even born, they want us to stop repeating what they did. Like they marched down the streets. Okay. They're like, hey, shorty, y'all ain't really got to do that right now. All right. There has to be something. There's got to be something else now. Okay, we boycott it.
Do they, though?
Do they what?
Do they really want us to do something different?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I've run into a lot of, I call them the civil rights soldiers, who want us to engage in some of the very same tactics without necessarily understanding everything that happened behind the scenes. Like, for instance, recently, and I know we're not going to go into politics, we're not doing that, but there was a group of folk who was singing "We Shall Overcome."
Well, that's okay to sing that. That's a song that we can still sing, because I celebrate and I appreciate, and just like I sing the UNIA anthem, right? So
great song. I'm not downing the song. I'm not downing the impetus of the song. I'm saying though, it's almost expected that we address things the same way with some of our elders, some of our civil rights soldiers.
Yes, because people who are still members of NAACP have fit into a mold that they're not going to change. And that's why NAACP, you have to remember when Marcus Garvey migrated to the United States of America, one of the criticisms from the educated Negroes was that he took the membership from NAACP. He had thousands of more members in the NAACP, right? And so that was just UNIA at one point was the largest black organization around the world, and that changed, of course, through a process. But at that time, that's when NAACP was so focused on racial integration, and I would say it's even worse now. NAACP really, really focuses on racial integration, such that no matter where you are across the nation, the NAACP chapter will be focusing on voter registration. That's usually the focus, right?
I can't disagree. I'm actually involved with the Virginia Beach NAACP, and
I've been involved in different chapters.
yeah,
It's not the only organization that's having that issue, but they're sticking to that. And when the elders bring in young people, the young people are expected to not change what the elders are doing, because the elders are still doing what Du Bois and Ida B. Wells and them did when they founded NAACP, right? And so if you come in as like a form of black radicalism, and black radicalism, like I always explain, we have centuries of black radicalism. It is not spitting on police, kicking down doors, waving the 4-4, all you hear is pop, it's not all that stuff. There's actually radicalism in terms of thought process, planning ahead. It's understanding the difference between conspiracy theories and awareness and solutions for our people. That's not playing by the book, because it's radicalism because it's not playing by the book. And by the book includes when you're told to only use European form of radicalism. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's disturbing because, of course, my mindset was, hey, we need to make demands with those who are seeking our political resource. And they're like, no, we got to get more voters. So, you know what? Code Keepers, I want you to do this. Code Keepers. Every time Doc does a reference, she's always doing these small references. I hope you're picking up on them. Let us know the artist or the song that she just hit. She just did a Biggie reference. What song was that from? Type it in the comments. Let's get back, because we can go off all day.
Today's topic, self-destruction. The real lady rap on this is bugging. They're going to catch that one too, hopefully.
You gave that one away.
Yeah.
You gave that one away.
Yeah. So this is an example of the economic development part. So the boycott part, I really want our people to understand. People like me, when I don't support, I haven't watched cable news stations in years. I don't even have it on my TV anymore. I don't subscribe to MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. They're all the same. They make a lot of money, and they give you a portion of facts, and they expect to attract a certain audience who loves a certain political party. And I tell people all political parties around the world lie, and they give bargains that you don't know about. So you can't just go based on news stations that send a certain angle. So
can't trust it.
Okay. So I want to just highlight, that's something I want our people to learn. Boycotting is effective, but you have to understand historical context, right? You have to understand historical context. And that's the one thing that when we talk about knowledge shares as a people, everything has historical context. What worked a century ago, 2 centuries ago, might not work now. So for example, if you tell black people to boycott the city bus transportation, now you better be providing transportation for our people to get to work, school, and elsewhere, right? And that includes people who are senior citizens and people with disabilities. Don't say boycott. If you don't, you're a sellout. And then you go back home chilling. Hello?
knock, knock, knocking at your door.
I say,
You're
who's that
knocking at
knocking?
somebody's door.
That's
You're
right.
knocking on somebody's door.
Boycotts are more than announcements on news stations and social media. You have to understand a boycott that worked 50 plus years ago does not work now. And that work, I'm talking about every boycott that happened 2 weeks ago as well. And I'm looking y'all in the eye. Every boycott that happened 2 weeks ago where y'all was so proud about that and people was talking about patronizing black businesses. Look here, if you don't patronize black businesses regularly anyway, do you really think these stores, and number one, the stores you're boycotting have black owned creators of products at the store? So this is the inconsistency I want our people to just understand. So you got to think about this. You got to just think about this in a larger span, because also if you're boycotting stores but you're still watching these cable news outlets, do you comprehend that you're contributing to the problem? And if you're boycotting because of DEI titles, do you recognize that a DEI title does not mean anything in terms of results? The same as affirmative action since the 1980s. So that's why I share entire readings about the criticism of affirmative action, including Derek Bell criticized affirmative action. By the way, Derek Bell did much more than critical race theory, y'all. Hello. Hello, y'all. Hey.
I give pause, but I agree.
You give
And I'm so
pause.
glad that you're saying what you're saying. The pause that I give is when done effectively, when planned, when done effectively, things can be effective. And I think too often some of us run with a narrative that it's not working anymore. And it's like, well, it only worked if you use the right strategy to begin with. So even back in the day, it didn't work unless they had the right strategy. So it always has to be tailored and it has to be the right strategy for it to work. The reason you know about things that happened back in the day, is because they were tailored and they were the right strategy. But the ones you don't know about didn't work as effectively because they weren't the right strategy. And sometimes you know what?
No, I heard you saying. I was thinking back in the day when I was young. I'm not a kid anymore, but some days I sit and wish I was a kid again.
Put in the chat. What is she talking about? What is she referencing?
So, but what you're saying is important. But I want our people to think about it this way, though. If you're planning a day boycott, does that mean you're going to go back shopping there the next day?
If you're doing it to develop the ability to be effective, yes.
If you shop there the next day, how did the one day boycott become effective? Because again, there are things that I've boycotted for years. I don't use it. I don't even acknowledge its existence. And I did not, and I see other black folks using it and I don't preach about it. It's not getting my money.
If we look back at the Montgomery bus boycott, the original plan was for one day and then to see the results. And when they saw the results, then they continued. So
Yes.
So to ask the question the way you asked it doesn't necessarily give all the factors that I think is needed for me to answer that question the way you
factors are
asked it.
history. The Montgomery boycott was how long ago? A long time ago, right? Now we have more access to transportation, right? So people would have more
I'm
options.
simply saying, well,
So that kind of boycott would have to change now too, right? Because people are like, I'm gonna get an Uber. Right?
I'm losing you. I stopped hearing you. I stopped hearing you for the last 15 seconds. So let's do this. I love that conversation. Let's continue that.
How do you stop hearing me?
But MLW.
Okay. Yep. So she segregated streetcars.
I don't hear you.
I'm still here.
Hey, I tell you what, Doc, do this. Do you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Leave the stream and come right back. because I don't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, I just heard you now.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
It's your computer. You're the one that's still.
yeah. I'm
Riverside is
not. For some reason, I don't hear you.
Okay, I'll leave and come back.
All right, code. Oh, psh. All right, code keepers. Technology. Things happen, as you know. I don't need to tell you. Um, but one of the things that I love about Maggie Lena Walker is the very information that Doc was just talking about. So, Doc, can say something very quickly?
Say something.
Say something. Oh, hey, code keepers, say something. What quote is that from? Right. All right. Continue, Doc. Let me stop. I'm going to get out the way.
You're not in the way. What you're saying is actually important because what you said is like boycotts historically, right? And how they just will change over time. All right. And we can talk about that more because we'll be talking about Amabalo in a little bit. And that's important. All right. So
that's the next show. That's the next show. Let's do that. Well, maybe the next show. All right.
Well, we're going to reference Amabalo for a little bit. All right, so here, the 1905, that's where Maggie Lena Walker operated the Emporium, and it had retail, employment, and training, and this is for Richmond Black women. So that was the focus on that. And so then, 1921, campaigned for Virginia's Superintendent of Public Instruction and an all-black political ticket. So that is the political development framework. And it should sound very familiar because for centuries, our people have tried to develop all black political tickets, black political parties, depending on the legislation and the policies in place in cities and states. Whether you actually can participate in the election can vary. Some places it requires signatures and all that stuff. Back then, of course, there were other issues regarding segregation. But that's an example of the role of the political tickets. And of course, Harold Cruz also suggests creating our own political framework like that. But remember, even with the black politicians, it's just like the same with the black civil rights leaders. They have a role, but we do not rely on them 100%, right? Because it's still the black artists, the black intellectuals, the black scholars who are the central component of developing our people in terms of the cultural development and the economic and political development. All right. And then this is where she looked at the burial society, so the insurance company. And that's huge because in more than 20 states, they had 100,000 members. And that's a huge deal for a black woman to do that at that time.
Huge.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Yep. So we can go to the next slide, please. So this is where I want our people just to quickly, I know that we want some comments in regarding Maggie Lena Walker. So I do just want to briefly mention Amabalo, and people can actually read the piece that my father and I published last year regarding Amabalo. So Amabalo did grassroots. So this is why I just want to mention Amabalo, because she was born in Lunenburg County, Virginia. The work that she did for 30 plus years was based in Richmond, VA. So that's an example of how Maggie Lena Walker provided some of the foundation for a lot of black women across the nation. And that includes, and I rhymed right there unintentionally because I'm like that. But that's an example of how even if you don't know that somebody is your role model or your mentor, once you start researching it more and more, you're like, wow, I'm not the first person to do this kind of work. And that's one of the lessons I want our people to get from this Amabalo component. It's grassroots, which means that she was not a business leader or any of that. She didn't have the same access to resources. It was literally showing up at meetings, knocking on doors, and, basically canvassing at that time, going from door to door, and figuring out what resources to utilize. And that's when Barlow became active in the creation of RTO, which is the Richmond Tenants Organization. So this is just something to consider. What does it mean for our people to impact housing, and particularly public housing? And this is important in rural areas, and it's also important in urban areas because population changes. So if you look at the origins of every city over the centuries, we talk about this a lot in sociology and criminology, criminal justice. We talk about the central business district, which is the center of the city where immigrant populations move. And then when people get enough economic resources, they tend to move out, and that's how, of course, counties were developed. So what they leave behind in the center of the city tend to be low-income housing and low-income stores and so forth. The idea is that if you have more money and want more resources, you get further away from the city into the county. Of course, now that's changing because a lot of people who've lived in the county for a century or so are complaining because, of course, now people are moving from the city into the county because now they themselves want to get away from concrete jungle. Like, Bob Marley said. Okay. All right. So this is looking at economic population shifts, and I'll always remember economics and race always intertwine. So earlier you had mentioned something regarding something not helping our people, this notion that nothing's helping black people. But as you know, and also people like William Julius Wilson explain, sometimes as a people, we have to say, okay, we're going to do collaborations that focus on socioeconomic status, which is education, income, occupation combined. So if the collaborators, and it could be grant funds, whoever it is, if they say, okay, we don't want race to be the emphasis, we want to help everyone who's poor, working class, lower middle class, and not only black people, the whole idea still is that it's going to have a trickle-down effect to improve conditions for black people. So that's just something to consider. There are resources that I want our people to understand, even if it doesn't have black on the title. We have to get to a point where we understand that we can be unwritten on the title. And that's why I want our people to understand things like DEI, affirmative action. Those are just titles. Homicidal, numero uno, like Special Ed said. You have to understand there's way more to effects than titles. You can put DEI on your forehead, and the results, if there's no results that show black people have occupational status increase, black people have job network increase, black people have salary increases, hourly pay increases, access to health insurance, dental insurance, all types of things paid through our taxes, then that means DEI didn't work, no matter how much people release diversity statements and say they're putting DEI in their policies again. So that's something to consider for Amarbalo. So the other slide also has a list of what they said. So the people who were in charge of housing and public housing in Richmond at that time, they said, here's what we're going to do. And Amabalo's group, they said, yeah, you can go to the next slide, please. And so just briefly, so Amabalo teaches what Maggie Lena Walker did, which is empowering the powerless. Empowering the powerless. This is where I want our people as black people. We can't say we're just oppressed. We cannot say we're powerless. It does not matter who is in political office regarding that. Okay? Because if your power, and of course, there are disparities in power, right? There's always disparities in decision-making power, economic power, and that's around the world. However, if you literally think that our people have zero, and you think that that is going to shift based on election results, then we've definitely been brainwashed, okay? Like if one politician and one White House can make you feel like, yeah, power to the people, we're going to make it, and then 4 years later you're like, nah, then that means that we're really missing the point as a people. We're missing the point of what our people have taught us for 5 centuries regarding race and thousands of years regarding other issues before racial categories existed. So that's the empowerment of the powerless that Barlow, Maggie Lena Walker, and other particularly black women taught. Septima Clark talked about that, right? When she was helping black people learn how to read and write in Charleston, South Carolina.
Dope. Yeah. Hey, look, I'm so glad you taught about Septima Clark.
Yeah.
She was on code. And more of us should be on code.
Yeah.
Well, Maggie Lena Walker was on code. Alma Barlow was on code.
Yep.
Let's stay on code.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so just really briefly, so Amabalo, some of the accomplishments that they did when they challenged the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority is Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority said, okay, here's what we're going to offer people who are renting public housing. And this is the response that Amabalo and them had. They said, you can't just tell people that they might get enough heating and cooling. It depends. Instead, you have to provide the needed amount of heating and cooling. All right? There should not be a question. And unfortunately, this issue still happens across the nation, right? Where people have public housing and their AC unit's not working, the heat's not working. They might be using space heaters and fires are rampant in winter months. That happens a lot in Baltimore where I live. The second point here, rent can increase annually, but not immediately when the tenant's income increases. Because initially, the RRHA was saying if your income increases, immediately your rent increases. And they were like, no, that should not happen so immediately. Another part, repair is made in 24 hours. So before, of course, people in public housing, if you need a repair, we'll get it when we get to it, right? And there's still people who are told that in public housing. And by the way, public housing means it's paid through taxes, okay? Also, oftentimes people who run public housing will tell people that they're not going to give things like refrigerators. They're not going to help people get locks for the doors. So what Barlow and them said is actually you're going to have a stove, you're going to have a refrigerator, you're going to give people locks for their doors, you're going to have all that. Also offer disability resources and elderly resources and transportation. Don't expect people to just have access on their own. And of course, this was by this time. Now, although there's Uber, taxis, we have the transit buses and everything, people still need access to those resources, and especially depending on where the public housing is located. And this last part here, initially the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority had said that if you are considered to be a drug dealer and considered to be using drugs, that you will immediately get kicked out of public housing. And Barlow and other RTO members said, no, we actually think there should be a hearing. They should be brought up and it should be a discussion and a decision. You can't just say we're going to kick out your bags, right? Because someone can be accused of something that can be false, number one. And if someone is involved in using drugs, it's oftentimes an addiction problem and they actually need help. And the worst thing is just kick somebody out. Because that it can be worse.
Are those the points that the RTO made or are those points that you're kind of adding to their points?
No, these are all points that RTO presented to RRHA to challenge their existing policies and practices. So these stars are all what Barlow and RTO said. They responded and said, this is actually what we want you all to change to that. So whenever I present and you can go to the next slide, please, because people can actually read the full article. And this is Rutledge M. Dennis and Kimya Dennis 2024. And they can find the entire PDF of the article on the Virginia Social Science Journal website. And they can also email me if they have difficulty accessing that. And so that's just highlighting the points because I want people to see an example of grassroots work, because Maggie Lena Walker was not grassroots. Maggie Lena Walker was considered prestigious, right? It was prestigious. People of upper socioeconomic status. They would be considered the black bourgeoisie and the talented 10th, right? So Amabalo and them are the grassroots efforts. And if you think of it from like Marcus Garvey and other components, Marcus Garvey also considered there to be a certain segment of our people who would be the ones to really contribute to our advancement, and would be a certain segment who would possibly travel to West Africa to do contributions there as well. So that's just an example of how to look at this from integrating Maggie Lena Walker to a grassroots focus, because we don't want our people to think that only formally educated black people can do work. It just can vary on the type of resources you have. And also you want to understand Du Bois's Talented 10th was not, unlike some books that are falsely claiming it to be genocide and ethnic cleansing. No. Du Bois has different publications to explain his Talented 10th. And if you actually read his full publications and not the books that cite him, you'll understand that he's talking about some of the complexities of having entire cultures and collectives of our people who are struggling, and there will be segments of our people who will be the people who actually have the resources to do the service for our people. In other words, you can't tell Black people who are struggling financially, struggling health-wise, living paycheck to paycheck or even less, to now risk it all to boycott something. Risk it all to don't go to work. That'll teach them a lesson. Black people who are struggling are not going to fall for your boycott, don't show up to work, and all that other jargon. Nor should they. Because when it's time to pay bills, you will be nowhere to be found, right? But that's why Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and them have components of Talented 10th, because it's going to be which of the Negroes or Africans or Blacks actually have the resources where they can actually risk it all. People like Charles Drew, right? You know?
Good brother Charles Drew, root to the breast.
Yep, Omega Psi Phi. People like that who actually can risk it all, because if it doesn't work out, then they have options, because they're part of these collectives of Black people who are formally educated and oftentimes have built wealth. So I will stop there.
Well, hey, Code Keepers, want to remind everybody of this.
You will be wealthier.
My wife and I were flipping our first house.
When you shift the way you see things, then your life is going to shift.
Money is a tool for what you want. Money is not what you want. You don't want money.
So that goes to show that you don't have faith when you do not take your money and put it into those accounts to earn interest. When you're scared thinking that something is going to happen, God says, who are you trusting in? Because I'm the one that has created the money system.
Well, I then got offered $350 million for my company.
It says you owe about $538,000.
That the individual and the individual family unit is responsible for filling their own cups.
I went from being homeless and living on the street to owning properties in Baltimore.
And that's why I decided to start a bank.
All right, yeah, that's the teaser for the documentary series you can find on YouTube called Generational Flip, or you can go to generationalflip.com. And Doc, I know you're going to give out some goodies. If you go to Doc's Linktree, she's always giving out the goods. She's always giving out the goods. Any last words on Alma Barlow or Maggie Lena Walker?
Yes, so as always, thank you for allowing me to speak on this. And we just want our people to focus on some outcomes, because we have to just teach outcomes to our people. We have to teach resource development to our people, and that has to be taught to every generation, or else you will not be shocked that people do not know where to go and they're waiting for everyone else to tell them where to go. We are not ants on a hill. We're not ants on a hill. Politicians want us to be, and unfortunately, our people have fallen in line with that. But we're not ants on a hill. Schools want us to be ants on a hill because they understand that most Black households do not read in the household. And reading is only done because a teacher forces you to do it, and that includes college dynamics as well. So we really have to change that bit by bit, because a lot of times when I speak with Black families, I see your books, yeah. When I speak with Black parents, a lot of times they'll be honest, they'll tell you they don't want to read. Even when I send books on the shared Google Drive, it's tons of PDFs of books and articles, and they'll tell you that they don't want to read. And so I just want our people to understand the work of people like Maggie Lena Walker and Alma Barlow. Some of the people who did this work, of course, were not readers, but now more and more we just have more access to libraries, bookstores. We just have more. As Black people, we just cannot claim that we don't have access to factual information and we don't have access to knowledge. We literally have a lot of access to stuff. We cannot compare ourselves to our elders and ancestors and claim that things are as bad as they were 50 years ago. Things are as bad as they were during transatlantic slavery. We can't claim that, and I heard somebody say today about, they're like, this is the Holocaust is happening all over again. Look here, black people, you're not getting anywhere saying stuff like that. It's the same thing I tell our people. Do not talk about you're getting guns stored somewhere, backpacking across Europe, whatever. All of that stuff, that's not the mindset of the average black person. It's an extremist, false mindset that you're losing our people. You have to know what most black people need, and most black people do not need to be told that you are storing something for the end of days. Because if you start telling our people it's the end of days, we already talk about issues regarding mental illness, physical illness. So now you want our people to really have PTSD and anxiety disorder because we think the end of days will be here tomorrow, like we're watching movie, like a sci-fi movie in our life. That's just not going to progress our people. It's not. Face factual information, have some solutions offered with the factual information. Do not give scare tactics to our people. Keep the scare tactics to yourself or with a wonderful black therapist, but do not deliver that to our people because that is offensive. It is false. It complies with what non-blacks want us to believe because they want us to get nowhere so that we are looking for a savior in them. And it also is an insult to Marcus Garvey, Maggie Lena Walker, Alma Barlow, W.B. Du Bois, Harold Cruz, Booker T. Washington, Ida B. Wells, Anna Julia Cooper, Kwame Ture,
and so on,
and so on. It's an insult to thousands of years of Africans who have done the work, risked their lives, risked their jobs, risked their families, so that you would not have to kick this jargon out of your mouth. I'm going to stop there.
All right, Code Keepers. That was another great fellow students. My fellow students, that was another great episode of Professor Kimya's class. Tap in. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you learned. Let us know what quotes Doc dropped. And we'll catch you next time. Peace.